Hi, this is Chris Young, and welcome to Good News on Tap for the 26th Sunday in Ordinary Time. You've probably never heard of him, but one of my favorite comedians is a storyteller named Ron Shuck. Although he's never appeared on the Blue Collar Comedy Tour, he has that same kind of down-home Southern humor. He speaks with a slow Southern drawl. A big part of his usual routine is to take stories out of the newspaper and make fun of the way that they're reported. Usually the stories he makes fun of are horrible tragedies, but the really ridiculous way that the news media reports these terrible tragedies somehow makes them hilariously funny when he tells the story. Now, while his material is a little bit too R-rated for a Christian video blog, I would like to try to clean up one of his stories a little bit, because today's gospel reminds me so much of a Ron Shuck story. He tells the story of a terrible tragedy that happened right here in Indianapolis in 1987. A National Guard fighter jet was on maneuvers in southern Indiana and had a flame out in its engine. The pilot desperately tried to make it to Indianapolis Airport by just gliding. Unfortunately, he came up about a half a mile short and had to bail out of the aircraft. The military jet crashed into the lobby of a nearby hotel, killing several people. Now, he treats the telling of the story with appropriate respect until he gets to the newspaper coverage. Ron Shuck's version goes something like this. The newspaper said that most of the guests in the hotel were surprised to learn an airplane had crashed into the lobby. Most of them were. Not necessarily all, just most. That means there had to be at least one guy who got up that morning and said, "You know, Ethel, it wouldn't surprise me one damn bit if big old aeroplane didn't come crashing right through the lobby of this here hotel." Of course, and then comes the real punchline. If a military aircraft crashes into your hotel lobby, killing several people, and you're not surprised, you are one tough son of a to impress. That's the kind of people we have in today's gospel. Jesus tells a parable of a man who lived a life of excess and decadence while ignoring the suffering of his neighbor Lazarus. When the decadent man ends up in his eternal punishment, he asks that his long-suffering friend Lazarus come down from heaven, dip his hand in some cool water, and give him a drink. Abraham, who's being God's representative there in heaven, I guess because Peter hadn't yet made it there, explains to the man that there's an unbridgeable gap between heaven and hell. And perhaps this story was the origin of that phrase that you often say to greedy people, "You want what?" Well, people in hell want ice water, but they don't get it. Well, here's the biblical proof of that. Anyway, the rich man says, "Send Lazarus, if you can't send Lazarus to give me a drink, send him down to one of my brothers and tell them not to waste their lives on decadence and greed like I did." And then Abraham explains that people back on earth had Moses and the prophets for all those years to warn them not to waste their life away. And then he goes on to say, even if a man should rise from the dead, telling them to reform their lives, the greedy people would not listen to him. And of course that brings me back to comedian Ron Shuck. Ron Shuck might say, if you're living a life of excess and decadence, and a man rises from the dead and tells you to reform your life, be generous, love one another, forgive one another, be kind to the poor and the infirm and the needy, and tend to their needs. If that man comes back from the dead and tells you these things, and you don't pay attention to him, you are one tough son of a to impress. So let's hope that we don't live our lives that way and make ourselves a punchline of a Ron Shuck joke. And that's Good News on Tap for the 26th Sunday in Ordinary Time.